Welcome in to Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into a Monday, February 6th edition of Daily Faceoff Live. We're streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, as well as, of course, dailyfaceoff.com. Back from the NHL All-Star Weekend. I'm Frank Saravalli. He is Daily Faceoff analyst Mike McKenna, former NHL netminder. Mike, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. As you can tell, it's the first Monday of the month. We got tornado sirens going off in St. Louis, but back to the real world, eh, man? You got a little time down on the beach there in Florida, got some things accomplished, and regular season's on us. So it looked like you had a great time down there at the All-Star festivities, Frank.
Yeah, no beach time. No one needs to see a whale on the beach. So just kind of kept it on the rails and had some fun with Tyler. But very productive weekend as well. Number of pods conducted. Looking forward to dropping those in upcoming days and weeks, and plenty of time spent around hockey, people, which means some gossip and chatter. Let's throw 2 minutes and 30 seconds up on the clock, and let's dive into what actually ended up being a pretty newsy Sunday with the New York Islanders announcing a new 8-year contract extension for newly acquired forward Bo Horvat, who, oddly enough, the first time we saw him wearing an Islander jersey was on Friday evening skills competition at All-Star Weekend. He still ended up playing for the Pacific Division, but had a New York Islander logo on his sweater. And Mike, when you see this extension come in at 8 times 8.5 for a total of $68 million, I'm told that the deal does not include any signing bonus money. Horvat gets a full no-trade clause for the first 4 years of the deal. The second half of the deal includes a 16-team no-trade list. What do you make of the contract extension? Lou Lamoriello, their GM, was saying, "What? Too many years, too many dollars." What do you think?
It's just funny. It's classic Lou. And I tend to agree with him. You know, I thought that this extension would probably come in just a little bit above $8 million. And there's a couple comparables. You look at Mika Zibanejad, who's at $8.5 million. It was an 8-year deal. That was signed in 2020. But Zibanejad had a couple of years where he'd been a point-a-game player. This is really a career season for Bo Horvat right now. He's been a 3/4 point-of-a-game player. He's never really eclipsed the goal scoring that he has right now. He's at 31. He's on pace. He'll probably end up at mid 40s at least, I would think, this year, maybe even 50. But I thought it was a little bit rich. I thought it'd come in probably 8.1, 8.25 is really where I expected, because he didn't take any signing bonus money, as you said. He does have some trade protection to help. I thought he'd just be a little bit closer, more towards the Hurdle deal that recently went last year for the San Jose Sharks, and he was just a little bit under there, or a little bit above at 8.1 and some change there. And that was in March. So I thought it was a little rich. I don't think it was as crazy of an overpay as at first glance because of some of the intangibles, Frank. But what did you think?
Yeah, I think what this does is it comes in at exactly market value. Like, the Islanders get no discount for offering the 8th year, I think, at $8.5 million. If he had gone to market in the summer, that's the one big leverage piece that Horvat loses, is that 8th year. And so, to me, look, I don't know if it's possible. I probably would have held firm at a flat $8 million and said, hey, this is the deal that we're willing to offer. But I also don't know how the parameters changed once it was pretty clear that the Islanders did not want to include any signing bonus money, which, to your point, makes it essentially buyout proof. So they save themselves from that. And in this case, they get their guy locked up that they just gave up some pretty significant assets for to get last week. No doubt that extension was coming. But a few days after Bo Horvat was saying that he thought he was going to be a Canuck for life, it looks like he may, in fact, potentially finish his career with the New York Islanders. Let's recap the All-Star Weekend. Let's take a trip down to South Florida. And Mike, when you got a chance to size up the weekend as a whole, whether it was the skills competition on Friday night or the All-Star game itself on Saturday with Matthew Tkachuk being named the MVP, which star shone brightest?
It definitely wasn't the skills comp. But I thought that this brightest star of the whole weekend for me was probably Dylan Larkin, and it was more so in the games, okay? Because I'm taking the skills comp. I'm chucking that whole thing out the window. The only thing I liked were the surfboards. And Larkin had a terrible fastest skater performance for the guy who's been the record holder in the NHL for quite some time. Man, he came out during the games. And I thought the games were good, Frank, aside from the jerseys being way too similar and the occasional misstep on passes. I mean, Larkin, dude, this guy had 21 shot attempts in 2 games. Like he had 5 goals and an assist, a hat trick in the final game. He was back checking like crazy. Like, he was clearly upset that he didn't do as well as he could have, and was accused of even sandbagging in fastest skater, which, I mean, to me, it kind of looked like the guys weren't going very hard or trying not to hurt themselves. So I could see how that perception was there, but he really showed to me why you got to remember Dylan Larkin is a top end player in the NHL. Sometimes he gets kind of overlooked in Detroit. I thought he was fantastic. Obviously, there were some other storylines. UC Saros from the goalie perspective was great. But I kind of like some kids that were from St. Louis, Frank. I thought you might kind of think the same as me, maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say, who's really happy about the Horvat extension? And that's Larkin, because you take a look at the season Horvat's had. We talked about it being the idea of a statistical outlier year. And Larkin has been just a notch under a point per game for multiple seasons now, and including this year. I think he has something like 43 points in 48 games. He had a 73-point season in 76 games. So if you take a look at that compared to Horvat, I think if you're Dylan Larkin, you go back to the Detroit Red Wings now as part of these negotiations and say, hey, I'm in the $9.5 million range. But just to put a bow on All-Star Weekend, for me, it was the Tkachuk family, all of them. Not just Matthew, the MVP, but Brady. I mean, you could also make the argument for little Ovi there. He was pretty fantastic. But the Tkachuks and the way that they embraced it, those guys were everywhere. I'm not kidding you. From elbow room and seeing big Walt Keith Tkachuk around town to seeing him fist bump in the stands when you saw Matthew score the hat trick. Brady was into it, the chemistry playing on the same team. Those guys, I was talking to Kevin Hayes as they were wrapping up All-Star Weekend. Of course, Hayes is the Flyers forward and first-time All-Star, is the Tkachuk's cousin, and he was saying, these guys were born for a stage like this. He said it used to be a situation where growing up in the Boston area, he said, those guys looked up to me and my brother Jimmy. He said, in this case, now it's me looking up to those guys. So I thought that was a nice touch and a nice wrap on All-Star Weekend. The Tkachuks just made for the moment. But want to also touch on the state of the league, Mike. NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman had his annual All-Star press conference to talk about all things NHL. And a number of topics were discussed from the projected revenue, which Bettman mentioned comes in at this point, give or take $6 billion, which is a huge increase from the 5.4 that the league brought in last year. I'll have more on that tomorrow and what that means for the NHL salary cap. He asked and faced some pretty typical and expected questions, particularly relating to the Pride Night fiascos with both the Flyers and the New York Rangers, the NHL's low television ratings nationally in the U.S. with both TNT and ESPN. He said that there was no update right now on the status of the 2018 Hockey Canada World Junior investigation. So of all the topics that were covered, Mike, I was curious, which one, and maybe outside of those, caught your attention and was something that you wanted to talk a little bit more about?
Well, I think that the ratings and the viewership is something that Bettman and Daly really latched onto in this presser, and for good reason, like saying that, hey, our viewership is still up. We also think that the decline in ratings that we've seen on ESPN in particular is going to bump up towards the end of the year with the ABC ratings that come along with being on the major flagship as opposed to being on cable, and that ESPN willingly was going up against, with the NHL's blessing, of football. So I think that he made sense of the ratings being down and the seemingly firestorm that seemed to cause, which was appreciated because I think he went into depth on it. But the one part that I thought he just filtered away really fast was Sinclair Broadcasting. And that's a rights holder of 12 local teams in the NHL. And he kind of said, well, it's just a drop in the bucket for revenues. Won't affect the cap much. And I'm like, man, the 12 teams that affects, Sinclair potentially going into bankruptcy, which owns those TV markets, that's a big deal. So I wanted to hear more there, but I appreciated the explanation in regards to ESPN and TNT and just viewership seemingly being down a little bit when it effectively wasn't.
Yeah, just a side note on that, as Sinclair and Bally Sports Group work through their process of reorganizing here, the people that I've talked to seem to express a lot of confidence that they're going to come through on the other end of this in fine shape. Obviously, something that the league is watching closely. But just going back to the television ratings, quickly, That part to me was actually a little bit more concerning because one of the explanations was, well, they're offering more games this year. And so therefore, if you compare apples to apples, then the total number, it's like, well, no, just because there's more games on, if less people are consuming it and you're still down a few percentage points, which is what they acknowledged, that doesn't really hold any water with me. I think the NHL, that was one of the big alarming factors of really that press conference in general, was just the complacent factor that I think exists around the league. There were a lot of people outside of those walls in the press conference room basically saying, look, All-Star Weekend is a mess. The product on the ice really struggled, especially the skills competition and the effort from players, the buy-in factor, all those things. And television ratings as a whole, if you're in the neighborhood of the WNBA, it's probably not a good spot to be in as you see other sports continue to pass you by, whether it's Major League Soccer or whatever it is that's next on the front burner. If you're the NHL, you want to try and, keep as many eyeballs as you can. So that part was concerning to me. A quick note as well. The 2024 All-Star Game, of course, officially was announced that is heading to Toronto. And one of the other things that I had asked the commissioner was, given the success of All-Star Weekend from a fan engagement perspective, in the sense of, he said that they had 7,000 guests, which was a record of partners and sponsors. That's their big sort of feather in their cap is, hey, come on down and join us for All-Star Weekend. It's an easy sell to get them to come to South Florida. You saw more players want to participate this year than in previous years. So I asked the question of, rather than trying to get to all 32 buildings, does it make sense to just select 5 or 2? And he said, no, in this case, moving forward, they'd like to continue to have it to be a rotation. Mike, just freshly posted on dailyfaceoff.com this morning, our deadline countdown series continues. 25 days until March 3rd, 3 weeks from Friday. It's coming in hot. And today we're taking a look at Brock Boeser of the Vancouver Canucks with the Bo Horvat trade 1 week ago. Here are some potential fits that I outlined. 7 teams that could see a scoring winger in their future. Someone in Boeser who is one of the NHL's pure shooters. I did a deep dive on his game, listed these 7 potential fits as well as a potential trade return or some recent comparables. Which one of these teams stands out to you as the best fit?
Well, Jersey's really good right off the bat because they can handle the cap hit, and he'd look good with Heischer and Hughes. But the one that's kind of under the radar for me that I'm very intrigued by, Frank, would be Washington. They just went out and spent a little bit on Strome and on Sonny Milano, but I still think they need a little bit of younger depth there on top of those 2 players projecting out. And Boeser's cap hit, is a little bit heavy at 6 and change, but you've also got a TJ Oshie who's missed time with injury. He's getting older. He's 36. And I can't help but think that Boeser would look really good on that right side, able to play a second line role. Problem is that Boeser's also been injured too. So what are we getting here? And as you alluded to in the article, Washington would probably have to send a player going back the other direction. And how about an Anthony Mantha? What about a Lars Eller? I mean, maybe these are the types of players that Vancouver would like to take on in a Mantha. But there are centermen coming along within that organization. A couple first rounders, Hendrik Lapierre, Connor McMichael, that'll be ready for duty soon. So I'm just really intrigued with Washington. I don't know if it'll work there, but Frank, there's also some other ones that I thought might be pretty good spots for Boeser to land.
Yeah, I think I'm less concerned about where and more concerned about what does the package look like for Vancouver, because you think back to the conversation we were having previously about the Canucks trying to create as much salary cap flexibility as possible. Well, they've added $10 million in wingers in the last couple weeks with the Kuzmenko re-signing and then adding Anthony Beauvillier, who seems like he's going to operate the bumper spot on Vancouver's power play as they resume their schedule out east. So you're thinking, okay, well, taking a player back in, let's say, Mantha, for instance, he's got 5.7 and 1 more year remaining. Does that really create any cap flexibility for the Canucks moving forward? It's just kind of moving around the deck chairs. And I think that's really what's going to limit and or impact how this trade goes down, or if it does, is the idea of what are the Canucks willing to retain and how much do they value the pure cap flexibility? Because, if they really want to get off the contract entirely, maybe outside of taking back a contract that's expiring, they're probably looking somewhere between a second and third round pick for Boeser. So something to keep an eye on if you are a Canucks fan or if you're a fan of a team in the market for a scoring winger, of which there are many, as we just outlined. Let's get to this week's edition of The Next Wave with our guy, Stephen Ellis. That's right. Pleased to be joined by our friend and associate editor at dailyfaceoff.com, and most importantly, prospect analyst Stephen Ellis for this week's edition of The Next Wave, which is delivered by our friends at Montana's. And Stephen, you had a great story on dailyfaceoff.com on Sunday, the 5 buyer teams with the best prospect assets. So which teams have the best arsenal to go out and trade those pieces to acquire players? And I was a little bit surprised with the number one selection at the top of the list. That was the Toronto Maple Leafs. And Matt Nyes is a big buzzword or buzz name that's been out there for the last calendar year. We know that the Leafs resisted the urge to trade Nyes last year. Is he sort of the focal point of the players that they could move? And why was it that you thought the Leafs were ahead of the pack and ahead of some other teams which have some pretty deep prospect pools?
I'm thinking we're Toronto because I don't really think too highly of their prospect base. But my argument there was this is a team that can trade pretty much all their top prospects, and I think it's worth it. This is a team that continuously gets stuck in the first round loop, and everyone knows all about that. But there's enough guys on that team where they might be decent players. I'm not a huge fan of Matt Nyes. I don't think he's got a great potential in the NHL. I think if he was not a Toronto Maple Leafs prospect, I think we're not hearing about him as often. A good player, no question, but he's a guy where if you can use him as a sweetener for a deal, I think he brings in a lot of value that way. You're looking at other guys like Fraser Minton, another guy I'm not too high on, but I know a lot of teams are for sure. He's a guy that was the Leafs traded down to make sure they can get him in the second round. They traded away the first round pick to get rid of some cap space there of Peter Mrazek. But those two guys alone will bring in some value. You got to look at guys like Ronnie Hirvonen and Nick Abruzzese, both having really good seasons in Finland and the AHL respectively. And they got that first round pick. I think they could be willing to trade all of that and still be looking at this as they're going to be in win now mode for a few years. It's okay to mortgage the future. It's not a huge future to begin with. And I think this is the time that they got to show they're really serious about making it out of that first round.
You know, you've got LA down in 4th on your list, and I was intrigued by that because to me, LA probably has, in my eyes, the most mature prospects pool to draw from. Players that could potentially enter the NHL lineup either this season or in the next. I mean, you got Alex Turcotte, Jordan Spence, Tyler Madden. You go down that list, there's a lot of them. There's also a first-round pick that they have available to the Kings if they choose to use it. So how do you see them slotting into this, especially, like I say, having a more mature prospect set than some of the other teams that can only offer some of the not quite as NHL-ready players?
With LA, I'm still thinking long-term here, and this is something where I don't think you got to be trading away some key pieces of your future to maybe make it out of the first round, maybe go a little longer further than that. I don't think this is the year they're going to go far. So I think if you're looking at it and you're saying, like, yeah, do you still believe in Alex Turcotte? Do you still believe in Quinton Byfield and guys like that? You should. And I think there's a few guys that are still a couple years away. And yeah, there's the guys like the Turcotte, maybe even a Tyler Madden that are probably not too far away from being these more impactful players, but I still think you got to look at the long term here. What are you going to do when Jonathan Quick retires? Obviously, different position, but what are you going to do when Andrzej Kopitar's gone? Then you lose 2 key parts of your future. It's kind of like a new era for the team, and I think you've got to be able to keep those assets as long as possible.
Stephen, one team I was surprised to see not make the top 5 for you was the New York Rangers. They've got a couple NHL-ready guys, I think, in Zach Jones, for instance, and then you take a look in Brennan Othman, for instance, and the impact that he made at World Junior. And I even think of someone maybe a bit further down on their list in someone like a Bryce McConnell-Barker. Like, why are these guys why did they not make the cut for you? And how do you size that up if you're in the GM chair for the New York Rangers, a team that obviously had a ton of playoff success last year, has sort of found their rhythm again this year? How big do you go in terms of trying to improve this team, both for now and the run that they might take this year and for the future? How do you balance all that together?
So I was very close to including them on this team, but for very similar reasons of Toronto. Let's see what you can actually do. This is a very replaceable prospect pool, but this is not a strong group, in my opinion. You look at Brendan Ottman. I think the world of him. He's one of my favorite prospects. I love Zach Jones. His career hasn't maybe gone as quickly as some expected. Some probably thought he'd be more of an impactful player at this point. But then after that, I don't really like what they've got. They got some guys where they might have some decent third liners and maybe some decent depth guys, but no one that's going to be a real impactful guy that I think brings in a lot of value. Like if you're at this point, it's like, if you're going to try to trade one of your young guys, like, do you look at the guys that are already there? Like, do you look at a Lafreniere and see maybe he needs a change of scenery somewhere else? To me, that'd be more valuable than trading their prospects, where again, there's just not a ton of value to be had right there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd be curious to see what other teams think of that. I think you might be onto something. Maybe there are people out there that are overvaluing what New York has in their system. And I just don't have any indication yet that the Rangers are willing to seriously entertain trading Alexis Lafreniere and or Capo Caco, guys like that have obviously made an impact, but not as big of one as they would have liked in the Garden this season. So thanks so much to Stephen Ellis for joining us for this week's edition of The Next Wave, which is delivered by our friends at Montana's. They're bringing back the viewing party all season long at Montana's. They've got their daily deals. Today is Monday. That means half-price wings. Also check out their comfort menu as well. We've got a $50 gift card up for grabs this week on our social channels. Head over to Daily Faceoff on Instagram or Twitter to enter. $50 could go a long way with their lineup of daily deals, which you can check out at montanas.ca. Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks, guys.
All right, time for our Daily Face-Off inbox question of the day. Hashtag AskDFO. Hit us up on Twitter. We'd be happy to take your questions live on air. Mike, we were just talking about All-Star. How do you fix it? What would be the tweak that you would make in order to make it better?
It's pretty simple. Go back to the future, man. Get rid of all the BS. Honestly, that skills comp took forever. It was disjointed. Make it focused. Make it fast. Speed it up. In and out with the skills comps. And I think you go back, look at the 1999 skills challenge. You take out the ridiculous goalie goal segment, and then you look at puck control relay, fastest skater, hardest shot, rapid fire, accuracy shooting, breakaway relay, man. These are the hallmarks of hockey. You need those. Show what the players can do. Put the buckets on them for fastest skaters so they don't feel scared out there to go fast. And let's see what they can do.
See, I actually liked the two cutaway events, which was the splash shot and the golf challenge. It's not great for in-person viewing, but especially when you're sitting in the arena and they're like, okay, now we're going to go to this. And it's like, okay, no one wants to just sit here and watch TV in the darkness in this arena. So it is a little bit strange. I just feel like some of the stuff that they do feels forced. Like some of the skits that they had, where there was the Happy Gilmore or the Miami Vice Mitch Marner thing. Like it was just like, if you have someone that is truly, genuinely, authentically funny, then please, by all means, give them a microphone and let them have a day. But if not, like don't try and force it. I understand it's a made for TV event. Not everything works. Full marks for them for trying, but I don't know. I think you're right. Shorten it. Make it an hour and a half, not 3 hours and change. I know that's expensive TV time that these networks are banking on, but still, I think the product ultimately at the end would be a lot better. That brings us to Tyler Yaremchuk and our Daily Face-Off Pointsbet Daily Bets segment. Tyler, great weekend in Florida, but the NHL slate is back on Monday night. What do you got?
Oh, it feels good to finally have like a nice solid slate of games. The last week it was all like 1 or 2, maybe 3 games, but it is full tonight, or full-ish tonight. So let's jump into what I like, courtesy of our friends at PointsBet Canada, starting with, well, let's stay in Florida, where the Bolts are taking on the Panthers. Not a lot of travel for the Tampa Bay Lightning heading into this game, and I just think this isn't quite priced right, honestly. The Bolts being minus 121, despite the fact they are clearly the better team, have been all year and have been as of late as well. They were 8-2-0 in their last 10 heading into the All-Star break. And, the Panthers weren't bad either. They were 5-3-2. They haven't been great on home ice either this season. I just think this is a nice spot to get some good value on the Bolts. It's very rare that you see them at only -121, and they were rolling heading into the break. Could also be getting Vasilevsky versus Bobrovsky, so I give them the edge between the pipes as well. I'm taking the favorite there. And then you know what? Coming out of the All-Star break, things can just be weird. And if you're going to give me +310 on more or less any team to win a hockey game in the NHL, I'm going to be tempted by it. The reason I'm playing this one is because, the Stars were kind of struggling heading into the break a little bit here. They had lost 3 straight games in overtime, and the Ducks were playing well. They also only sent one player in Troy Terry to the All-Star game, so maybe there's the element of them being a little rested, but they won 3 in a row heading into the break, including beating the Colorado Avalanche. So I really like the Anaheim Ducks in this hockey game. +310. I mean, listen, it's maybe not the most likely outcome, but at +310, the juice is just there, and I love it, Frank. I'm taking the Ducks as underdogs.
Tyler, I love a good underdog play. Like, those are always the things that I'm after and looking at. What are the best odds that I can get to try and make a dent on the sports book? That's really what I'm after. Yeah. So not always taking the chalk. So it's always fun to ride something like that. So I'll be in on the Ducks tonight with you. So let's go.
Let's do it.
Thanks to Tyler for our PointsBet Daily Bet segment. That brings us to garbage time with Mike McKenna. Mike, what caught your eye? What caught your attention from around the hockey world over the weekend?
Man, I rode the buses for 20 years of my life, between juniors, college, pro. And I got to tell you, this is a first. I've never seen anything like this. Over the weekend in Danville, Illinois, a city that I used to play junior against occasionally, their team didn't show up. In the SPHL, the Southern Professional Hockey League, which is a single A league, which is a reputable league, okay? Like, players go there, they get paid, not a lot, but it's a league that has a rep. It's been around for a long time. The home team just straight up didn't show, dude. Like, the visiting team, Quad City, shows up. So they skate warm-ups. They line up for the anthem. A player takes a lap. They salute the crowd, and they win a 1-0 forfeit victory. And then get this. It was supposed to be a skate with the team night in Danville. The visiting team stuck around to skate with the fans in Danville, the fans of a team that may or may not even exist any longer, Frank. This is right out of Slapshot. This is Joe McGrath here saying, I'd like to sell the jacuzzi, the massage table, our bus. This is it in real life. And it happened over the weekend in Danville, Illinois.
Unbelievable. I love how you were selling the SPHL. You were like, it's a league. It's a real league. And I was like, okay, good. Well, now that we solved that, it's just amazing to see them stick around and skate the lap with fans. And salute
what else
the
you
crowd.
gonna do?
Like, the clip is epic, and it is peak minor league hockey. I'm sure you've got a ton of stories from your time, as you said, traversing the country on buses for 20 years. So add it to the list. Danville, Illinois, and Quad City. What a game. Thanks to Mike McKenna for Garbage Time and for today's edition of Daily Faceoff Live. Thanks to Tyler Remchuk and our friend Stephen Ellis for the next wave, our technical producer, Alex Allard. That'll do it for today's edition. We'll be back with you on Tuesday, 12 noon Eastern. You know where to find us. Until then, enjoy hockey. It's back.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.